Yep, a little late, but never a dollar short. We're going to give you guys a great and fun episode here on Unfair Sports, where we take a pensive approach to the sports conversation. I'm your host, Jay. Thank y'all for pulling up here on the YouTube channel and listening wherever podcasts are downloaded and listened to. While you're here, please go ahead, like, subscribe, rate, review, give us 5 stars. You don't think we deserve it? Just give us 5 anyway and gift it. So on today's episode of Unfair Sports, we're going to dive into everything in the world of college football as the season's about to wrap up and start with the college football playoff. Did they get it right? And why is one team worse than others? We're going to talk about Colorado and ask the question, is Coach Prime, is he cooked? We'll talk a little bit about Texas A&M and the hiring around in the coaching carousel, and we'll wrap things up and ask the question, did Oklahoma make the best move, and can USC get Jim Leonhard? Hit us up on the Unfair fan line, 430-901-1906, and let us know what you think of the show. Love to get your strongest opinions, and we love to hear that and spit it back at you. So if you want to potentially hop on the show and make some noise, hit us up on that line, 430-901-1906. Yeah, I know. I've been owing y'all this for a while. Told y'all we was going to try to get the show back up and running. Then life happens. But you know what? We're putting together an actual schedule. We plan on following it here in 2024. So these will still remain sporadic, but we're going to get you guys some content where I'm talking all of college football and not just my favorite team. So thank y'all for pulling up as usual. We always appreciate the support. The channel's growing, over 12,000 subs, and we're pushing for 20,000 by the end of 2024. Actually, we can meet that by the summer. It's really the goal. So we'll be dropping a lot of content, tons of college football stuff. I want to talk a little bit of NFL and NBA down the line as well. We'll probably be doing that once the college football season is completely done, and kind of talk NFL playoffs as well as talk Super Bowl and then NBA and all that jazz, because that's how we stay busy around these streets outside of recruiting. But there's a lot going on in the college football world, and I wanted to dive into the first and foremost thing that dropped last night, which is our college football playoff rankings. And these rankings, of course, per the usual, got everybody losing their mind. So it's funny, I've seen a few people talk about the logic behind what the committee has, and to be absolutely honest, I don't think they really use a bunch of logic. And when I walked through what they have, I asked myself the question of, did the team with the best win, not the worst loss, but the best win, actually get what they deserve? And I'm going to be honest, they didn't. And I hate to say it because it's a rival of mine, but yeah, I don't think that Texas got done right in this entire scenario. So let's dive into what this looks like. So college football playoffs went up. Your top 8, of course, it's going to be, 1, 2, 3, and 4 of Georgia, Michigan, Washington, and then Florida State. Florida State moves up because Ohio State got knocked off, and they lost at Michigan for the 3rd straight year in a row. So we had to ask the question, is Ryan Day going to get fired? He ain't going to get fired. Ohio State ain't that ridiculous. But there is some fireable offenses in there because he lost to Sherrone Moore and not Jim Harbaugh, because Harbaugh is on suspension. So when Harbaugh comes back to play against Iowa this weekend and they just thrash the Hawkeyes because they can't score on offense, they're going back to college football playoffs. And I said this at the beginning of the season as a joke, but not kind of joking anymore. Michigan's going to win the national championship, and then they're going to vacate all of their wins. That sounds so like the NCAA that it's not even funny anymore. It feels like it's going to somehow do that. It's annoying. Yes, I'm annoyed by even the thought of it. But guess what? It's probably what's going to happen. So after Florida State, you've got Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, Missouri, Penn State, Ole Miss, and then Oklahoma. That's your top 12, which I think matters. Then you've got LSU, Louisville, Arizona in your top 15. And I'm going to be honest with all of you. I have one question around this. So in your top 4, makes sense. Georgia, Michigan, Washington, they're all undefeated. Same thing in Florida State. If all of them win, they're all in. They're undefeated. You can't argue the top undefeated teams in college football are all up there, right? Now, some people want to make an argument for Liberty, but Liberty does not deserve to go up there right now just off of strength of schedule. But Liberty does deserve to probably be in a New Year's Six bowl game because they're undefeated. Being undefeated in any conference is really hard to do. You can say, well, they play with cupcakes. They play cupcakes that match up with their own team's talent. It's hard. Like, that's why teams don't always go undefeated. It's very rare that you get undefeated teams because it's really hard to do. So, but, Tulane's going to get one of those New Year's Six bowls. But I'm looking at this and those four make sense. Your 5 through 8 confuses me. And this is the reason why. Oregon lost on the road, and they don't really have a signature win. They don't. Ohio State, similarly. Now, they beat Penn State, who's number 10, and Penn State lost to both the top two teams in Michigan and Ohio State. They lose to them every year, so that's, parts of the course. Texas lost to Oklahoma at a neutral site in their rivalry game, and Alabama lost to Texas. So the only logical thing they did here is they put Texas above Alabama. But I hate this argument and hate making this argument for them, while at the same time, we make up to a pensive approach to the sports conversation here. Texas deserves to be at number 5. I said it. They do. I said it because Texas has the best win in college football right now. Period. They went to Tuscaloosa and won by double digits. They have the best win. They lost to number 12 Oklahoma. They beat Alabama by double digits on the road. They have the best win in college football. You could try to argue that Michigan does by beating Ohio State, but Michigan beat Ohio State at home this year. Last year, Michigan had that argument. That's why they were in. They beat Ohio State in Ohio State. Makes sense, right? Washington beat Oregon at home. Florida State, who have they beaten? They beat LSU, neutral site. Still a pretty good win because LSU is 13th. LSU has been up and down, but LSU has still been a solid team. But Texas beating Alabama on the road deserves them to move up. That's my argument for the Longhorns being above everybody else. Now, the thing that Oregon wins in that, and I think the committee even said this themselves, and remind myself, is that Oregon actually has like one of the best point differentials. They basically just blow out everybody, which is supposed to do. So that kind of gives them an edge. I don't think that Texas should be below Ohio State, though. The way this is lining up, Texas has no chance of making the playoffs. Zero. They have no chance of making it. They need all 4 teams up top to lose. All 4. Georgia has to lose to Alabama. Michigan has to lose to Iowa. Washington has to lose to Oregon. And Florida State has to lose to Louisville. That's the only way that Texas gets in. All 4 have to lose. I only see one of them losing. Maybe 2. And that's Washington and Florida State. They have the most challenging going ahead. Florida State has Louisville with backup quarterback that they're playing with. And Louisville struggled against Kentucky, in which tells me I don't think they're going to really give Florida State as much of a problem, but Florida State's still playing without their starting quarterback, Jordan Travis. They've shown that that's not their entire team, but at the same time, again, Florida State has to play without their starting quarterback. Oregon beats Washington, depending on how close of a game it is. Washington may not fall very far. They may just flip-flop spots. That is where Texas is going to run into a problem. And even if they beat Oklahoma State soundingly, which Oklahoma State's 18th in these polls, they probably won't make it. They're going to be bamboozled, hoodwinked, led astray, straight up deceived by the look of them being at number 7. And if Alabama beats Georgia, Alabama ends up having the best win in college football because they beat the number 1 team who's not lost in 3 years now. Bama gets the nod as the best win. And so that's the way that Texas has a chance of getting screwed in all of this, is because if Alabama beats Georgia at that neutral site, which is in Atlanta, so I mean, it's not that. It's about the same, not too far of a distance from Tuscaloosa, but still, Bama beats Georgia. Yeah, they're going to give them the nod of the best win because they beat a team that hasn't been beaten in 3 years. What's the argument against that? Now, it wasn't on the road, but what's the argument against that, right? That's where you're going to have to try to figure out who do you think is real and who's not. Can Georgia not lose to, if Georgia loses to Bama, like, does that make Bama more real down the stretch? Because everybody's argument against Texas in the Alabama game is that Texas beat them in the second week of the season, and Bama isn't the Bama that is today. But none of these teams are who they were week 2. So it's going to be confusing. But the last one on here that confused me is Oklahoma at 12. So you got Missouri, Penn State, Ole Miss, and Oklahoma tied for 2 losses, right? And your argument could be that, well, Oklahoma lost to 2 unranked teams. Oklahoma State's now 18 and Kansas is no longer ranked. I can totally understand that. Good argument. Who has the best win of those 4 teams? Oklahoma. They have the best win. So if you're going off resume, all these teams lost. Ole Miss lost to Bama and Georgia. Missouri lost to LSU and Georgia. And Penn State lost to Michigan and Ohio State. So we asked the question of whose wins are better? Right? Oklahoma's the only one that's got a win in the top 10. They've got the most wins out of it. And ESPN even wrote this up, which I thought was very fascinating that they actually showed some pro-Oklahomaness in this, because nobody ever shows pro-Oklahomaness in this. It's kind of wild to me. Because based upon the way that the Big 12 does their rules, there was a really good chance that Oklahoma was going to play in the conference championship game, but now, of course, they're not. And so, but when you look at things, Oklahoma is higher rated in just about most of the advanced metrics as Missouri, Ole Miss, and Penn State. Penn State's best wins are against Iowa and Northwestern. I don't think Penn State should be that high. They've not shown a single thing. And so ESPN has their quad 1 opponents, so opponents in like the top upper echelon. And Oklahoma has more wins versus those top teams than Mississippi or Missouri. And we all know that Penn State's schedule's paper thin. So I make the argument here that Oklahoma should be probably higher. At least 10. They've got the best win out of all 4 of those teams against Texas. They beat Texas on a neutral site. The other ones lost games too. They lost home games and road games. But what about... I mean, for Ole Miss, they lost both their games on the road. Both of them was a double-digit loss on the road. Missouri's 2 losses one was a double-digit, and the Georgia one was a little bit closer. But I don't see anything about Penn State that tells me that they deserve to be where they're at. They combined for 27 points against their 2 rivals, 12 points, and 15 points against Ohio State, and then Michigan at home. They didn't lose by double digits in either one of those games, though. We'll give them that. But it's also the Big Ten. They don't seem to score a lot of points. So I asked the question, what is their best win besides blowing out Iowa 31-0? And the only reason why Iowa's in the conference championship game is because what? Iowa's on the other side of another paper-thin schedule resume. So I asked the argument. Y'all can hop in the comments. Let me know what y'all's thoughts. I'm a little annoyed on that portion of it, but at the same time, the committee doesn't have logic. I don't know why we think they do. Like, why we even argue towards the fact that they have logic, because they've shown us for the last, 4 years that there's a lot of non-logic in any of it. So, yeah, we'll see what that looks like going forward. So let's flip the switch over here and let's talk about some of this coaching carousel, right? So Texas A&M got their guy. They went ahead and hired Elko, and I thought that was the best hire. Now, it's funny to me because You saw that they first was going to hire Mark Stoops from Kentucky, and the rumor came out that the only reason why they didn't hire him is because the board didn't approve it. Now, what makes it funny is that they basically said they wanted Stoops, and they passed on him because the board decided that they didn't feel like he was the coach for them. Right? And I get it, I guess. But the funny thing is, the running joke is now that they decided that they didn't want a 7-5 coach from a basketball school, Kentucky, Mark Stoops. So instead, they hired a 7-5 coach from a basketball school that also wears blue, Elko and Duke. Can somebody explain the logic to me on that? And it's funny because I looked at Elko's contract, and I am very, 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 very disappointed in Jimmy Sexton in the utmost way. Jimmy Sexton let this man go there on a 6-year, $7 million contract. $42 million. He took half of what Jimbo Fisher got in his extension. And I'm guessing the boosters said, well, the school decided that they wanted to do the Jimbo Fisher thing. We ain't touching it. Because I heard the boosters aren't even paying the buyout. That the school has to do it. Okay. That makes sense. But Jimmy Sexton, what are you doing? What is this, Jimmy? This is not a Jimmy Sexton contract. I'm a little disappointed. I'm going to be honest. I am hardcore disappointed that this is what we got out of this, but it's okay. I do think that the Elko hiring was a really good hire for them. That was probably one of their better ones, right? You can't beat hiring Elko, who spent time at A&M as a defensive coordinator. And the smart move about that hire is that he actually will most likely retain majority of the staff, especially on the defensive side. If he keeps Elijah Robinson, Texas A&M loses none of those big-time defensive linemen they had. And to be honest, the way that Duke team played, they were super physical. Now, the question's going to be is who is going to be the offensive coordinator, and does he get himself a quarterback similar to Riley Leonhard that can light up college football? Or can he convince Riley Leonhard to transfer? That's what they're going to need. They're going to need a quarterback. They're going to need a quarterback and they need an offensive coordinator that's going to be able to let this quarterback do his thing. Now, so if Elko's smart, he goes in there and he hires his OC there at Duke, bring him over, and they convince Leonhard to follow him. Right? Like, that's the way it makes the most sense. I think that's the logical one. So, unless Duke decides to keep Kevin Johns, I think that Elko will be smart to snatch that man back up and say, hey, come over here, bring Riley Leonhard, and let's do it again. But do it in the SEC this time. All you do is be healthy, and Leonhard will be healthy by next season. That's the most logical move. But I'll tell you, that was a good hire by Texas A&M. That was the hire I said they should have done. And the reason why I said that is because the retention of the talent that they currently have should be the most important and the number one thing on their list of things to do is that. And so shout out to them for being smart and keeping and retaining talent, because not very many teams are smart enough to actually do that like you're supposed to. They did it. They did everything that you are supposed to do. When hiring a coach, they found the guy that made the most sense, that has the most continuity with everything they have going on there, and enough success to where there's some realisticness there. Like A&M, I don't know what makes them think that they're a tier 1 team. They're not. I'll say this, though. I will agree with Josh Pate. They are one of the best jobs in college football because you get paid a lot of money and you're going to get fired and take home a lot of money. But the other thing is when you look at this, like they populated his Elko's contract, Texas Ags did, as well as his salary pool. He got $11 million in salary pool to hire his assistant coach, his analysts, operations, and everything. He got $11 million. pretty good if you really think about it, right? He's going to be able to bring in some of the best to do things down there. That's a good move, right? Yeah, it's definitely what we would have not expected from Texas A&M. Now I'll just keep that a buck. I didn't expect Texas A&M to actually make that decision. That was probably one of their smarter ones. So Elko's a good hire. Now let's look at the other two coaches they got hired. You've got Jonathan Smith going over to Michigan State, and then Jeff Lebby takes the Mississippi State job. And when I saw the Jonathan Smith hire, I was like, man, that sucks for Oregon State. You got a homegrown dude and he bounces to take another head coaching job because they're going to pay him a hell of a lot more money. More so because you guys don't have a conference right now. I feel bad for the Beavers on that one. That hurt me for them. I would have thought that they would have found a way to retain that man, and unfortunately they did not. Their guy just wasn't going to work out. But him going to Michigan State, pretty good hire. Michigan State has the money and the capabilities on the talent pool to have successful seasons. We've seen it. We've seen 11 win seasons out of Michigan State. They have done a lot more with a lot less. So that was a smart hire. And I think that so far the hires that we've seen have been the best. And then, of course, Jeff Lebby going to Mississippi State. And so, I've had my qualms with Lebby as a Oklahoma fan. But the one thing I always pointed out is that he has one of the best offenses in college football. He did. Quite consistently, right? This may have been his first time really running the plays here at Oklahoma. But Jeff Lebby was a hot name when we hired him, right? Like, the rumors around Georgia and Alabama calling him to come there, legit. They had interest because of his offenses. And what did he do this year? Put up a top 5 offense again. So Mississippi State's going to get a guy that, first time getting a head coaching job. We just got to see if he can handle it as a head coach and offensive coordinator. People think that it's easy to do what the Lane train has done, but the Lane train has also done it 3 jobs. Takes time to be able to be an offensive coordinator and head coach, really make it work. I think the bigger thing is that who depends on who Lebby hires as his offensive coordinator, because Lebby's going to be the main play caller. He's going to be the one that vetoes it, but he's going to have an OC that's going to run some plays for him, right? He's going to make it easier on himself. And there was the rumors that he was trying to pull a couple of Oklahoma coaches, tried to get his boy John Finley, which I really thought he was going to go with him. That was the one coach I said was probably gone. And then you bring Seth Luttrell up. He takes over tight ends, but it appears that Seth Luttrell and John Finley will be the offensive coordinators now. So it's not going to happen. And then DeMarco Murray was one that was rumored to go potentially. Well, he had been offered, as well as Bill Beatonbow. And they're all Oklahoma guys. So it's like, I don't think they want to leave that job, which makes a lot of sense, right? You don't want to go, even though the opportunity to be an offensive coordinator is, pretty fruitful for you, especially if you have aspirations of being a head coach. They're like, we'll be good. And it's funny because, depending on how good your room is and how good your players produce and how much of an up-and-comer you are, I've seen guys get head coaching jobs out of being a position coach. I mean, hell, Syracuse is about to hire the DB coach over there at Georgia, right? So it can happen. It's just not very often. But John Finley was an up-and-coming guy, so it made sense for Oklahoma to give him the offensive coordinator coach spot with Seth Luttrell, who has run offenses and run a team. He was the head coach at North Texas. And so because he has that experience, it makes the most sense. And so Mississippi State taking in Jeff Lebby is going to do nothing but keep the type of players they have on roster are built for Lebby's type of system, because they basically played underneath Mike Leach, rest in peace. So that's going to keep that continuity that they needed right there on the spot, which shout out to Mississippi State for that portion of it. Think that was actually a smart deal, right? And so I like the coaching hire so far. It looks like Sean Lewis, and that transitioned us right into the next topic of discussion, Colorado. Let's talk about Colorado real quick. Sean Lewis got demoted And because he got demoted, we have to ask the question, is Colorado doing the right move? Right? Well, that was the right move. Is Colorado cooked? I guess you can ask the question. And so they demoted Sean Lewis. Tim Brewster just left. He decided to resign. And that shocked me that he stepped down because Tim was a Jackson State coach. Like, Tim Brewster followed Prime from Jackson State here. And I would have never thought that he was going to be the one that's going to go step down. He felt like he was a Coach Prime guy. Shocked me when I saw that, right? So now he stepped down there. We see Sean Lewis is about to get a head coaching job at San Diego State, which, granted, he deserves it. He's a really good coach. If you put the right talent in front of him, he can do it. And going to San Diego State, they've got some pretty solid talent. I think he's going to be successful there. His offense is shown to be very innovative and successful. Hell, he did a really good job at Colorado with Shadur and them. Offense, passing, and tempo wasn't their problem. Their problem, the offensive line was really bad, and their defense was not very good. And that happens, right? But Colorado's also dealing with a lot of other stuff. I mean, there's an article that came out that Colorado did not have insurance for, like, disability insurance. How do you not have that? So they weren't insured. Saw this article at the end of September from Yahoo Sports, which slipped through the cracks, I'm going to be honest. Travis Hunter gets hurt. They found out that they did not have any type of liability insurance. So they need total disability and critical injury coverage and income protection for their players. They didn't have any of that in place. Now I think they've secured it since, but how did they not have that in place when you have players like Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter? Travis Hunter gets hurt, couldn't find out you ain't got it. Now they got to get it just in case, now that Hunter's back healthy and Shadur has a fractured back. Jeez Louise. Whew. So Colorado's in shambles. And then they lost, 5 decommits? They had 5 players decommit in the last month. So they lost Danny O'Neal, the quarterback, which makes sense. He was a Sean Lewis guy. They lost Antoine Hill, the quarterback in the 2025 class. Makes sense. Sean Lewis is gone. They lost Talon Chandler out of Missouri. He decided to stay home and go to the University of Missouri. And then they lost Winston Watkins Jr., in which he said he don't know if Coach Prime's going to be here. And Jamarice Wilder out of Venice, Florida, 3-star running back, also decommitted. So they've seen 5 players in the month of November decommit. 3 from 25, so their entire 25 class is decommitted in 2024. And that begs the question, is there signs that Coach Prime might be gone after this coming season? If Watkins decided, I don't want to go commit there because I don't know if he's going to be there? Or has the shine of Prime been rubbed off? I'm going to be honest. I don't still doubt him. They won 4 games this year after only winning 1, and he replaced the entire roster. Now, people lost their minds when he did that, but I was like, that's what you're supposed to do. They went 1-11 last year. Like, did you think he was going to go 4-8 with the same players? They went 1-11 last year. You clean house. You try to find the best players you can, and then you let players go. Now, his approach might not have been the best, but I mean, if you've been in the locker room with coaches and players, they'll tell you that's not uncommon. What he did is not something that's just, oh my gosh, mind blowing. Can't believe that it happened. No, that's usually what happens. That is a very common way that has been done. I don't know what to think about Colorado right now, but I do still think that they have a bright future. Now, they're struggling on a recruiting trail right now. Their 24 class is sitting, in like the 60s on 247, 40s and on 3. They got a lot of work to do in the in-home visits over the next month before early signing day. Because if Prime wants to be successful there at Colorado, they're going to want to have these kids in-house in January to really start building them up. The question now is going to be who their offensive coordinator. I hope it's not going to be Pat Shurmur. I hope he doesn't stick to the old head coach from the NFL. He's great to have as an analyst, someone that can help facilitate things and help people understand what makes the most sense. You don't need him as your offensive coordinator. You need a different play caller. You need somebody that's going to work and leverage that altitude to the highest level. I mean, someone like Sean Lewis did. And I honestly thought that Sean Lewis was going to stick around. I thought Sean Lewis was going to be the next head coach of Colorado when Prime left. I really did. But doesn't look like that. Now he's going to have to get his class going. I mean, he told his boys he's proud of them. He wasn't disappointed. He won 4 games. Love it. I mean, they did. I thought they were going to go at least 6-6, but they lost 2 games that they should not have lost. And so now we have to beg the question of, can Colorado bounce back and go to a bowl game next year? If Shedeur comes back, I can see it with Travis Hunter and them, Kamari McLean, and I can see it. They just got to go do it now, right? They got to go do it. And I'm not fighting with the fact that Coach Prime did what he did. I mean, he's building something there at Colorado. And so, I'm still one of the optimistic people. A lot of y'all hate him. He failed in your eyes like he's supposed to. He didn't fail in my eyes. He won 4 games. And he beat TCU on the road to start the season off. They were probably the most watched team in college football. Got to give them that. They did something they were supposed to do, right? And so Prime's got to figure this out. If he figures it out, he'll be fine. That's going to be the hard part, is figuring out what to do with these players that ain't coming there right now. Hopefully they still coming, because I'm still going to be rooting for them. Okay, so we talked about Oklahoma a little bit in the coaching change carousel, and we had to ask the question, Oklahoma make the right move? And I'm going to be honest, I like the move that Oklahoma has done with Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley, because it makes the most sense in continuity-wise, right? So we talked about it in another video, got more detail on that. I'll let you guys check that one out, but I want to talk about USC and what they've got next, right? So there's reports going around that USC is looking at Jim Leonhard as their new defensive coordinator, and did some digging on it or whatnot. And the one thing you got to remember about Jim Leonhard is that Jim Leonhard has not left the Midwest. But I'll say this. The thing that helps USC is that USC is moving to what? The Big Ten. So there's going to be a lot of games that direction for him, right? It's pretty good, because when you look at the job-wise, he came back to Wisconsin after playing in the NFL in 2016. He was at Wisconsin as the DB coach. Then he was the D coordinator there. And then he was the interim head coach. And now he's at Illinois as an analyst. I know at one point he was looking at doing a defensive coordinator job in the NFL. And I think he pulled his name out of the Eagles running because he was, I think he had surgery. And so because of that, he's never really left his area, right? So I think that he's potentially looking for an NFL job, which is one thing that I've read in a few places. But USC will be smart. And the genius move would be to hire him. And the best way to do that, honestly, they would need to go ahead and let that man bring in his entire staff that he wants to bring in, let him hire his own people and all of that. I know that traditionally in the Riley way of doing things is that he would want to have that coach retain his staff or certain people. No. You don't do that. If you bring in Jim Leonhard, you let him do what he wants to do. You let him take who he wants to take. You let him bring in who he wants to bring in, because the last thing you will want to do is bring a coach like him who's really good at defense. And, I mean, he was actually, what's funny, he was Reggie Pearson's coach while I was at Wisconsin. You don't let a guy like him not have his own staff members. If he wants to clean house, let him clean house. Let him bring in the guys he want to bring in, because he produced a good defense at Wisconsin. He did. They were like efficiency-wise, like top 2 in the country. So now, granted, we talk about how the Big Ten and their cupcake schedules and, you know, all of that jazz, and he produced some really good defenses there at Wisconsin. And so you let him pick who he wants. And so the question is going to be, is USC going to allow that? Is Lincoln Riley going to let this man just come in there, bring in, fire everybody on the defense side of the ball and say, this is who I want? Possibly. But the other question is what USC is going to do about their strength and conditioning situation. Because we've talked about how the players they look smaller, they don't look very strong, and they get pushed around. And their defenses have given up a lot of yards every single season he's been head coach somewhere. A lot of points. Now, I tell everybody, when it comes to a defense, if you give up a bunch of yards and you give up no points, it's kind of a good thing about your defense. Like, you're letting people get stuff in between, but you're forcing them still to either punt the ball, kick field goals. Or you're stopping them on 4th down or red zone. Pretty darn good. That's what you want to do. And so, for USC's sake, they got to stop letting people score. And I think Leonhard can do that for them, right? His defense is, like I said, they're pretty good. He's done well on the defensive side of the ball. And he's been a finalist for the Broyles Award. So, you can't beat that for a young coach, right? You got to let this man pick who he wants. I mean, he's 41 years old, so he's still very young. And around the age of Lincoln Riley, if you want to see success, you bring in Jim Leonhard, you let him do his thing. I don't see USC letting him do that, though. I don't see Riley letting him do that, which is a mistake on their part. If USC wants to see success in the Big Ten, they need a guy with the mind that can handle the Big Ten. And you've got a guy that's had success defensively in the Big Ten. Why would you not find a way to get Jim Leonhard and give him what he wants? You need to open the checkbook up. And honestly, I'll put it to you this way. Make the man head coach in waiting. Period. Just do it. You know that at some point Lincoln Riley's gone. Lincoln Riley is not a lifer at USC. He's not a lifer in college football. He's going to leave. Let the man be your coach in waiting and tell him, no, you've got the job. We'll give you however many years to do it. Because I know Leonhard was upset that he couldn't get the job there at Wisconsin. He's interim head coach. He ran it for a year and they didn't, he ran it from basically the entire season from October to the rest of the year, and they didn't retain him. He deserved a little bit better, but at the same time, Luke Fickell was a really good hire for Wisconsin. So I'm wondering if Jim Leonhard is going to be the hire that USC can close. Y'all think he can do it? Hop in the comments. Let me know what y'all's thoughts. I'm curious to how y'all feel about that. I don't know what USC is going to do to be successful this year, but, they got a lot of stuff to fix internally, but one good way to put actual, needle to skin and close up some of those wounds instead of putting Band-Aids on them, Jim Leonhard, he'd be surgery. Let him just gut out all the staff and bring in who he wants or even retain who he wants. But let him have control on the defensive side of the ball. I promise y'all see a lot more success. But since he hasn't signed on the line, which is dotted yet, I'm concerned. I have concern about that hiring. So let me know y'all thoughts. All right, we're going to wrap this bad boy up with a bow on it. Thank y'all for pulling up as usual here to Unfair Sports. I told y'all I'd get y'all Wednesday episode. We talked coaching carousel. We talked about the college football playoffs and the craziness behind that. We talked a lot. So I appreciate y'all supporting as usual. We're going to get back on track one of these days, I promise. So these will be still sporadic, but we may actually have more come down the line. If you like the content, please make sure you hit the like button while you're here. Wipe your feet, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. You don't think we deserve it? Just give us 5 anyway, and we'll chop it up with y'all in a few days. We'll get some stuff together. We'll talk about the conference championship weekend. All right, we'll talk soon. Peace.